divorce lawyers of Reddit. What's the most outrageous reason someone filed for divorce? Was a loud chewer at the dinner table. He developed a complex and literally needed out as he couldn't bear to eat with her. I worked for a law office where the owner would talk about the man who sued for divorce because his wife would no longer allow him to use a loaded gun as a marital aid. She had apparently agreed to it at some point and was fine with the gun as long as it was empty, but that just wasn't good enough for him. My client was the outrageous one, so my heart went out to his poor wife. He had OCD, which manifested primarily financially, so he made their lives a penny pinching hell. Examples: he was obsessed with avoiding unnecessary driving, wear and tear on the car, gas expenses, so he cut the whole family's hair at home and never let them eat at a restaurant or go to the movies. Weirdest of all, he kept one toilet paper roll on him at all times, and you had to get one square from him before you could go to the bathroom. He never gave more than one square. Wife finally got fed up and left him when 1. He gave her bangs during an in-home haircut, and 2. Their daughter was so traumatized by the toilet paper thing they couldn't potty train her. Also, he hated paying his divorce lawyer bill. He was also an old-fashioned mega Catholic who considered divorce a deadly sin. He viewed my whole job as an unnecessary and sinful expense. My dad was a divorce lawyer. He had a client who wanted to divorce her husband for 2 reasons. 1. He did not have enough hair on his chest. 2. He did not drive fast enough. Keep in mind this was in the 70s when chest hair was a bit more important. Wasn't the reason, but it happened during the course of the divorce. Neither side would follow the court orders. When they had to go back to court, they were fighting over a pistol and the man's grandmother's bowls. I assumed for weeks that these bowls were some sort of heirloom or expensive china. When they finally brought the bowls in to swap, they were fucking Tupperware. Holy shit. I read this as grandmother's bowels and was very confused/concerned. I dropped into court to visit a family friend who was a judge and had quite a treat. A wealthy area farmer and his wife were in court that day fighting about possessions/assets. The judge had had enough. After briefly reviewing the history of their case, he offered the couple one last opportunity to retire to a conference room and come to an agreement. Both refused. Their lawyers were clearly as weary as the judge. The judge then asks each party which room in their house was their favorite room. She picked the kitchen, and he picked his gun room. The judge then informed them that, because the matter had dragged on for so long with both behaving like children, he was going to decide the matter of the property. She was awarded everything in the kitchen, and the gun room. Everything else was to be sold at auction with the profits equally divided. Then the judge told them, "Now neither of you is happy, right?" They clearly were not happy. She was kidnapped in Mexico and he refused to pay ransom. Eventually her family managed to pay, and she was left on the side of the road. It is not outrageous as in petty, but outrageous as how absurd that is. I had some friends get divorced because she legit hated Dale Earnhardt, and he legit hated Jeff Gordon. NASCAR fans from 1995 to 2005 would not consider this a petty issue. Oh man, this brings back childhood memories. Kind of related story that totally doesn't matter. Growing up, my dad was big into NASCAR and loved Dale Earnhardt. Hated Jeff Gordon, of course. I loved Dale too, but I also secretly loved Jeff and hid it. I must have been around 6, 8-ish. One day while the race was on, I was so upset about betraying my dad or something by liking Jeff Gordon that my mom found me crying in my room. After I told her why I was upset, she went and got my dad, and he sat and told me it was okay for me to like Jeff Gordon even if he doesn't, that I'm allowed to like whatever I want that makes me happy, and that nothing more would make him happier. Then he hugged me and told me to come watch the race and cheer him on. Later that week he got me a #24 sticker to put on my mirror in my room. IDK. I don't have very many good memories in my life, but that is one of them. Viralegal here. Still remember an early case I worked on. Man divorced his wife for her bingo addiction. 10 to 12 times per week she went to bingo. She was 82, he was 86. But the all-time greatest to 20 somethings. They were irreconcilable because he kept smoking her weed stash when she wasn't home. Not a divorce lawyer, but used to practice criminal defense work. Once had a heavily pregnant client that attacked her husband of less than a year with an iron. Said client was now sitting in a police cell, sobbing and insisting that her husband deserved it and she wanted a divorce. I asked what he had supposedly done, assuming he cheated or something similar. Turns out she'd checked his phone and found a single porn site in his browsing history from over 2 years beforehand. Not the most pleasant thing to discover, but hardly worth battering him half to death and demanding a divorce. He was frustrated by her hoarding. She was frustrated by his utter uselessness. He filed for divorce, and she was my client. Her prized possession was a room or two full of scrapbooking materials. His prized possession was a yard full of junk cars that he never worked on. They had no children and no real assets. They hated each other more than any two people I'd ever met, and the only terms they would agree to were these: he gets the scrapbooking stuff and she gets the cars. My client also took the house, as he had no income and didn't want it anyway. It was the shortest divorce decree I ever drafted. I intentionally squeezed it onto one page, and the judge and I had a good laugh over it. Once the decree was signed and filed, she hauled all the scrapbooking stuff to the yard, and he removed it to the dump. She then called the junk shop I referred her to, and had all of his cars removed from the yard. He got drunk at the wedding. She did not like it and decided to divorce him right after the honeymoon, which she went to without him. Moreover, this was all an elaborate scheme of divorce robbery because the guy was loaded and so was his entire family. They were loaded because they were a family of excellent lawyers, and he was a third-generation lawyer with all the smarts and experience of his predecessors combined. Let's just say it did not go well for her. My client put his wife in an assisted living facility based on a misdiagnosis, the medication of which caused the wife to be unable to care for herself. While in the facility, my client's shocker started dating another woman and methinks began using hard drugs. He used a loot of money on both of these things. She eventually got off the medication and got better. Suffice to say, she was not happy about what had transpired. Failed exorcisms. Client had an inner ear condition that caused chronic vertigo, but symptoms could be treated with medication. Husband was an evangelical who was convinced his wife 1 had become possessed and that her vertigo and general crankiness with his methods were evidence of demonic possession. 2. The medications she was taking was enabling the devil to hide inside her. And 3. The only proper recourse was exorcism. He would hide her meds until she got dizzy and then try various methods of exorcism. This included sweating it out, put under blankets, while incapacitated and locked in a room full of space heater, freezing it out, pretty much the reverse with fans, and bags of ice. Surprising it out, he would jump out and scare her like it was the hiccups, but instead of yelling back quote boo, he would recite the Lord's Prayer or Psalms. The final straw was that he tried to back quote surprise it out of her by pushing her down the stairs when they were heading out for dinner. Note, this guy was some type of executive, and they still went out to dinner after the stairs incident. She asked for the divorce at an Applebee's that night. I have often tried to picture that conversation, as she was adamant that he was a total sweetheart and never acted out of malice or anger. I used to work in a general practice firm, and the guy that worked across the hallway from me was a family law attorney. He was a good attorney, but every day I would hear him yelling on the phone at his clients. One day I asked him why he did, when it was obviously stressful in a non-legal work type of way. He pointed out that there's one chapter of statutes dedicated to it, and you need to know a little civil procedure and that's about it. It's an amazing segment of business. Not only is not that difficult from an intellectual rigor perspective, but holy shit, those family law attorneys make serious bank for willing to put up with the headaches. I would routinely hear him yelling at clients like, "Don't go over there. I'm instructing you to not go there. If you go there, I will fire you as a client, and when you go to jail I won't take your call." For the record, this was in a fairly affluent suburb. Most of the disputes that would drive him into my office for a break would revolve around parents wanting to know their recourse for ex-hubby dropping the kids off 4 minutes later than agreed, and how the client planned to get even. I also recall one time a client had gotten his cell phone number and called him on a Saturday evening with some emergency spoiler. His ex had done something egregious like took the kids to the pool without his consent. So, on Monday morning the attorney sent the client an invoice for $500 for a Saturday phone call, which probably lasted like 5 minutes. He did it so the guy would call him and say, "What's this?" And then the attorney could explain to him that is what he charges for non-emergency weekend calls. This time he'd waive it, but if he ever did it again he could be sure to get a bill that he'd end up paying. Not me, but a friend. My mum has divorced her husband because his mother still coddled him at age 40 with his consent. They lived with his mother, common in Asia. By coddle I mean that she would walk straight into their room after his shower and powder his back for him. They couldn't lock their bedroom door because his mother would come in as and when she wanted. If they locked the door, she would knock repeatedly asking what they were doing. Lol, what would they be possibly doing? Playing poker.